I see a lot of patterns. That might be because I'm a computer scientist, but like I look at like the flow of traffic and I'm like, that could be improved. Like, what if the signals were different? I also see a lot of lighting and shadows from my photography experience. And I guess a lot of shapes and like how things line up, which I guess is still technically a pattern. But I'll be walking along and like, how when you pass like rows of corn, how they do the whole like lots of little like rows shooting through them. But then like I'll be walking through arches and like, oh, that frames that well and that sort of thing. I do this a lot while I'm walking around. See, sounds are funny because I really enjoy sounds, but there are also a ton of sounds that, like, if they're happening, I just can't focus. Like, if someone is eating near me, I can't even think. Like, it ruins the experience, which is unfortunate because that tends to happen a lot in the world. I mean, I like the sound of music, more so on, like, the classical instrumental side. I have a harder time enjoying, like, the really techno, hardcore dubstep type thing. And I guess the sound of nature, because I've done a lot of backpacking, so I'm kind of very at home being alone with nothing really going on around me. And so sometimes, like, all of the sounds that happen, in a city do kind of get overwhelming and you just want to put noise-canceling headphones on. But even noise-canceling headphones make a sound, so you can't really escape. See, the funny thing is, I have almost no sense of smell, which is a very good advantage because then all food tastes pretty good to me because, taste and smell are linked. But it's also kind of like hard to tell if I need to shower or if, the building's on fire. So I grew up in California, which is like half Mexican, which means a lot of the food in my hometown was Mexican, and so whenever I'm hungry, like my automatic, just like the taste that I feel in my mouth when I'm hungry is Mexican food. So if you ever want to make me happy, just bring Mexican food over. I mean, I enjoy lots of food, like cheesecake, but really, like, taste isn't that strong of a sense in my world. And honestly, I find that basically all taste is kind of an acquired thing, because I have so much Mexican food, like, that's my taste. But, I am really open to eating natural foods, whole wheat and broccoli and natural things, because that's what I grew up on and that's what my mom cooked. Whereas a lot of my friends are like, this whole grain bread is so weird. Which I guess that's a good taste to have, because then you eat healthier, but it's an interesting one. Not something that you think about a lot. The one that like comes off the top of my head is the feel of like sliding my finger over my MacBook Air. So I switched to being a Mac person last year. I've spent a lot of time just being fascinated with like how well constructed it is and kind of the polish, even though it's anodized and not polished. Yeah, I'm much more of a visual texture person. Like, I don't need to feel something to kind of... Like, I look at this hardwood floor and it's like, yes, it's very smooth, but then, like, more than that is the fact that the wood grains make it look rough. I do tend to play with my hair a lot, but in a weird way, like, I separate out little strands of it, and then I feel like those strands are, like, really long and I need to cut them because they're, like, sticking out, even though it's because I pulled them out. Leads to some really strange self-haircuts. I like to think about the way the world works. Like why decisions were made and how things could be improved on. Which is kind of an interesting train of thought because, clearly people architected the traffic patterns of the city and clearly, like, they have PhDs in that, so it's probably pretty well done. And so, like, why am I qualified to criticize how they do the traffic? But then, if you lose that, if you stop questioning why things are done, then you kind of, I don't know, to me it feels like giving up. Even if, like, it's not fighting the man, it's just being an inquiring mind. I also have, like, a business side to me, so I'll think of ideas and, like, oh, this would be cool, like a Bluetooth-controlled remote control car, like, how can we sell that? I get a lot of jokes from friends for that, because they'll bring up an idea and they'll be like, so Todd, how do we monetize this? As far as space, the dimensions go, I'm very, like, Tetris-y and love packing things as efficiently as possible. Which I guess, like, I'm also a very clean person, so that ties into the whole, like, efficiency thing. As far as the great space, being a Star Trek fan, I'm kind of obliged to be a tremendous fan of the space program. And it's kind of weird when you think that 30, 40 years ago, there was someone standing on another planet, and just like imagining what it feels like to be one of like 3 people standing on a rock with with no air around you, and you can just see the entire planet, millions of kilometers away from you. And to some degree, I feel like we've kind of explored almost all of the frontiers here on Earth. We keep on uncovering new technologies. Smartphones, kind of a new frontier. When you think of like the tremendous vastness that remains to be explored in space, it all seems kind of trivial. And our society really values explorers above all else. Andrew Carnegie, Bill Gates, like all of these people were exploring, the steel industry and computers, and that made them successful, and like our society values them. And if we don't keep pushing those boundaries, then we'll keep thinking back to the last great person to do anything, because nothing new will have happened. I would probably make movies. I also love doing technology things, but technology is very much a business, and like you have to create a product that you can sell and that provides value to people. And so there's very little flexibility in what you can create. And there's very little artistic or personal expression in that. The end goal is to make money. Like people won't remember you because you created that impactful service. But if you make an inspiring movie like Lord of the Rings, people don't remember Lord of the Rings because it made like $1 billion. People remember Lord of the Rings because they connected to it. Well, one of my favorite like icebreaker questions is, what is the craziest thing that you have ever done that you are proud of? Gets by the whole don't want to talk about things that I'm not proud of thing. That's kind of an icebreaker, though. It doesn't really get into people's motivations. I think a lot of times if you start asking people of like, why are you doing what you're currently doing, you get into a lot of really interesting assumptions that, a surprising amount of people haven't really thought about. Like, I'm doing music because that's what I'm good at. Hear that type of thing a lot. And beginning to ask people like, what do you enjoy? And why aren't you doing that instead? You learn so much about the assumptions that people walk into, well, not all of life, but their present life. They assume that I just spent 4 years in college studying this, like clearly I need to do that for the rest of my life. And you learn that a lot of people are really afraid of just doing. Getting off topic here, because the question was about questions, not the results of said questions. Yeah, my favorite party line is still what's the craziest thing that you've done that you are proud of? Backpacking alone in Europe for 3 weeks. Yeah, and that question is interesting, because then you start learning what people value. For me, it was my adventure in Europe. It's more insightful than it seems, I guess. Not zombie apocalypse. Probably not a meteor. Hopefully our space program will take care of that. My best guess, if the world ends anytime in the next 100 years, will be because governments have failed in some horrendous way. We kind of got a taste of what can go wrong with a large recession, but, well, not necessarily governments, but like large organizations, banks, doing something that screws up the economy. Like, it would be the economy that would do it. Now, interestingly, I actually have a theory going that unemployment will only increase for the rest of humanity. Eventually we'll reach a point where, we have unlimited energy and robots do everything, so there's literally no need for people to work. But the transition between here and now is going to be one full of pain, and humans might not survive it. Because society is currently based on the idea that you have to work your share, and that unemployed people are government leechers. But then what happens when there's no need for half of the human population to work? Suddenly all of our government models of social security and that sort of thing just don't work, and I'm not convinced that the government will be able to solve that before all things go to hell. Yeah, I mean, if the government doesn't figure out how to handle, like, letting people be unemployed, then the end result will be that corporations will just pay people like 10 cents per hour, because there's so many people that need work, you know. So hopefully something will be figured out before it becomes like en masse slavery. It'd be an unfortunate end of the world. Well, I do kind of enjoy technological innovation. You know, I like getting my new MacBook every year, and this being the first year that I've gotten one. I really enjoy seeing that kind of incremental progress that can really only come from a stable environment. So that would be unfortunate. People pretending that the work they do is important. I mean, I'm convinced that as of, like, even today, 80 to 90% of jobs are completely useless. You know, everyone who serves food, everyone who drives a taxi, everyone who works at a factory, like, all of your jobs could in fact be done by a robot today, and thus you are providing no actual value. So I will not miss people wasting their time as a human doing idiotic tasks. I'm not judging people who, like, are baristas at Starbucks. It's just, I will be happy to see the world move on to better things, unless the slavery scenario happens, in which case that will be very unfortunate. But think optimistic thoughts. That's tough to say, because hopefully I'll die a long time from now, and I don't know what life holds still being in college. Hopefully I would say that I did things as I wanted to, and that, you know, the only limits in what I did were the limits of the possible and not silly barriers in my head. Kind of a variation of the usual no regrets line. Defib in 3! Thank you for watching!